Here is part 1, written in simple, basic English, in third-person style, free of any violated content. Rio flew his small salvage ship low over the desolate desert moon. The orange sun had just dipped below the rocky horizon, in long shadows, stretched across the cracked sands. He scanned the landscape through his ship's worn viewport, searching for anything useful to salvage. The moon was known for abandoned outposts and broken freighters. But Rio's eyes caught a shape he did not expect, a lone figure chained to a rusted metal post. Standing against a rock spire, curiosity and concern pushed Rio to land. He set the ship's engines to idle and climbed down the ladder, each step raising a small cloud of dust. He carried only the basic tools a salvage pilot might need: a portable welder, a multi-tool, and a small first aid kit. The air was thin but breathable, with a faint scent of ozone and hot metal. Rio approached the chained figure slowly, not wanting to startle whoever or whatever it was. The figure was young and small, no more than a teenager in size, but clearly not human. She had pointed ears and soft pale fur along her arms and legs. Her eyes, a bright silver color, watched Rio carefully. She wore simple cloth wraps to cover her modesty, and her hands shook against the heavy steel cuffs. The chains rattled when she moved. Rio knelt at a safe distance and called out in a calm voice, "I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name?" The girl hesitated, her ears flattening against her head. She glanced at the chains and back at Rio. After a moment, she whispered Lyra. Her voice sounded hoarse and tired. Rio nodded and gave a small smile. "Rio," he said, "I don't know how you got here, but I'll get those chains off you." With that promise, Rio set down his multi-tool and unhooked his portable welder. He tested the welder's flame on a scrap of metal first. The torch flared with a soft blue light. Rio scanned the chains for a spot where he could cut without hurting. Lyra. She held still, her silver eyes fixed on the glowing tip. Rio's heart ached at the sight of her suffering. He recalled stories of poachers who captured strange creatures for profit, and he feared Lyra might have been a victim. As he worked, Rio asked gentle questions. "How long have you been here?" he said, not lifting his eyes from the chain. Lyra swallowed hard and answered in a low voice, "3 sons. They left me to die." Rio paused at his workbench. "Da-da-da-da-dad." He set aside his torch and pressed a hand to the chain's rough link. "I'm sorry," he said. Lyra's ears twitched, and she looked away. Rio returned the torch to the chain, carefully cutting through the outer link. Sparks flew and the metal glowed red, shielded Lyra's face with his free hand. The first link gave way. Rio slipped. It opened and moved on to the next. Lyra stayed as still as a statue, though Rio could see her muscles tense. She stared at her own chained wrists, as if she were only now ready to believe she might be free. At last, Rio snapped the final link. The chain dropped to the ground with a heavy clatter. Lyra's hands were raw and marked by the metal cuffs, but she flexed her fingers and drew in a deep breath. Rio scooped the broken chain into his bag for later disposal and offered Lyra a clean cloth. She accepted it with trembling hands and began to wipe the grime from her wrists. Rio led Lyra toward a nearby ridge of red rock, hoping to find shelter from the cold night wind. They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of their boots on loose gravel. Lyra kept her gaze on the ground, her shoulders hunched. Rio walked slightly behind her, giving her space but ready to help if she stumbled after a few minutes. Rio found a flat ledge large enough for both of them. He set down his bag and produced 2 metal flasks. He handed one to Lyra. "Water," he said. "It's fresh." Lyra took a cautious sip, her lips brushing the metal. She closed her eyes and swallowed, relief softening her expression. Rio drank from his own flask, watching Lyra with concern. "Why were you chained here?" Rio asked. Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes shining in the dim light. She hesitated, but then said, "They wanted my heart. They believed it had magic." Rio frowned. He had heard of myths about werewolf blood and power, but he had never believed them. Yet the burns and scars on Lyra's skin told a different story. "That's cruel," Rio said softly. Lyra hugged her knees to her chest. "I tried to escape once," she said. "They caught me and chained me here. They said I would never leave." Rio felt anger rise in him, placed a steady hand on Lyra's shoulder. "You are free now," he said. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." Lyra's ears twitched with emotion. She did not speak, but Rio could see tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. Rio set up a small campfire with some dried wood he had found nearby. The flames danced in the growing darkness. He offered Lyra a piece of dried fruit from his pack. She took it and nibbed gently. She ate. Rio gathered scrap metal pieces and small ropes. He began to work on repairing his sidearm holster, a simple job that let his hands stay busy. Lyra watched him, curiosity replacing some of her fear. When the fire settled into embers, Rio looked at Lyra and asked, "Would you like to tell me more about yourself?" Lyra hesitated again, then nodded. "I come from a forest world," she said. "My people live under tall trees and run free. I was studying the stars when they came." Rio nodded, imagining her world of green and light, a stark contrast to the barren moon. "I was taken by hunters," Lyra continued. "They cut out pieces of my fur for trophies. They measured me like an animal." Her voice shook, and Rio's chest tightened. He turned away, giving her privacy. He looked at the stars overhead and wondered how he could make things right for Lyra. Rio lay back on the ledge and motioned for Lyra to join him. She hesitated, but then sat beside him. Together, they gazed at the silent stars. Rio spoke softly. "You're safe now. Tomorrow, we'll leave this place." Lyra's fur brushed his arm, and she leaned against him just a little. Rio felt a warmth in his chest he had not felt in years. The moon's cold wind faded into the quiet night. Rio and Lyra sat on that red rock ledge, two strangers bound by hope and trust. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but in that moment Rio knew he had a purpose: to carry Lyra away from her chains and into a new life. Rio woke before dawn, the pale light painting the red rocks in soft gray. He stretched and found Lyra still curled beside him, her breathing steady. Rio packed their few supplies with quiet care. He wrapped Lyra's raw wrists in a clean cloth and secured it gently. "Ready?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded and rose, her silver eyes alert. Together, they climbed down the rocky ledge and walked toward Rio's ship. A battered freighter with faded paint and dented panels as they neared the landing pad. Rio checked the small engine vents for damage. He ran a hand along the hull, then opened the hatch. Lyra stepped inside, marveling at the cramped cargo hold filled with scrap metal and spare parts. Rio flicked switches, and the engines hummed to life. Outside, the sun broke over the horizon, its light warming the cold metal of the ship. Rio guided Lyra to a narrow bench and offered her a simple breakfast of dried fruit and protein bars. She ate slowly, eyes bright with cautious hope. They lifted off the desert moon and flew into open space. Rio set a course toward the nearby star system, where he knew a safe port might exist. Lyra pressed her forehead against the cold viewport glass, watching stars streak by. Rio sat at the controls, eyes focused on navigation displays. "How do you feel?" he asked after a long silence. Lyra turned and managed a small smile. "I feel ... lighter," she said. "Thank you." Rio looked away, blinking back the pride he felt at helping her. Midway through their flight, an alarm beeped. Rio frowned and checked the sensors. A small patrol frigate was closing fast, its profile familiar. Poacher class, Rio's heart pounded. He edged the ship into a nebula cloud he knew from past runs. Nebula's swirling gas would hide them. Lyra watched as Rio adjusted the shields and throttled down the engines. The stars outside dimmed behind the cloud's haze. Inside the nebula, the ship shuddered under stray particles. Rio gripped the controls. "We're safe for now," he said. Lyra nodded but did not move. Rio studied her and gave her a reassuring look. He turned back to the scanner. The poacher ship's blip faded as it searched the clear lanes. Rio let out a slow breath, tapped a finger on the console, plotting a route deeper into the nebula's heart. They drifted through swirling blue mist. Rio shut off non-essential systems to avoid detection. Lyra sat beside him, curiosity replacing fear. She asked, "Where are you taking me?" Rio thought for a moment. "To a place called Allo Station," he said. "It shelters beings like you. They will keep you safe." Lyra's ears twitched. She had never heard of Allo Station, but trusted Rio's calm voice. Together they navigated by memory and old maps. Rio kept on a hold ashpad. After hours in the nebula, Rio found a hidden jump. Pointy activated the drive and they slipped into hyperspace. Lyra closed her eyes, relief softening her features. Rio monitored the exit, his breath steady. In minutes, they dropped back into normal space near a neutral waypoint. Rio keyed. "The come to hail Allo Station." A gentle voice answered and guided them to the docking bay. Rio eased the ship down with practiced skill. Inside the docking bay, robot cranes and drones moved silently. Rio and Lyra stepped onto the platform. Rio introduced Lyra to a station attendant, a tall alien with soft green skin and kind eyes. The attendant offered water and a clean uniform. Lyra hesitated, but then accepted. Rio explained Lyra's story in simple terms. The attendant's eyes narrowed with concern, and he promised to help. Rio felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Rio lingered for a moment, unsure whether to stay or go. Lyra met his gaze and said, "Thank you, Rio, for everything." Rio managed a small smile. "Travel safe," he replied. He turned and walked toward his ship. Before boarding, he glanced back. Lyra stood beside the green-skinned attendant, her posture straight and her eyes bright. Rio waved once and then disappeared down the ramp. As Rio's ship lifted off, Lyra stood on the docking platform and watched until he was gone. A spark of hope glowed in her silver eyes. She turned to the attendant and spoke her first plans for a new life. The station's soft lights reflected in her fur as she stepped into the corridor. Far above, Rio's ship vanished into the stars, carrying the memory of a promise kept. The journey had been hard, but both knew that freedom and friendship were stronger than any chain. Lyra stood in the bright corridor of Allo Station, her silver eyes wide with wonder. The walls glowed softly, and strange plants and glass containers lined the passage. She felt the steady hum of the station beneath her feet. For the first time, in many suns, she felt calm. A gentle voice called her name. "Lyra." She turned and saw the green-skinned attendant from the docking bay. "I'm Mara," the attendant said. "I will show you to your room." Lyra followed Mara through winding corridors, past windows that looked out on distant stars. The station felt alive, like a city suspended in space. Mara led Lyra to a small chamber with a soft bed, a desk, and a large viewport. "This is yours. For now," Mara said. "You can rest, and tomorrow we will help you find work and housing." Lyra nodded and managed a small smile. She set down the bag Rio had left her and looked out at a ringed planet below. It was so different from the desert moon where she had suffered. Here, she could heal. After a night of deep sleep, Lyra woke to the smell of warm bread. She got dressed in the clean uniform. Mara had given her a simple tunic and pants that fit. Her tall, lithe frame acted. She wrapped her wrists carefully and stepped into the corridor. Mara met her with a tray of breakfast. "Eat first," Mara said kindly. Lyra sat at a nearby table and tasted the bread. It was soft and fresh, and she ate eagerly. As she ate, Lyra watched other station inhabitants pass by. Some were human. Some had bright scales, and others had smooth blue skin. They greeted Mara with nods and smiles. Lyra felt shy but hopeful. After breakfast, Mara guided her to an office where a tall, silver-haired woman waited behind a desk. "Warmly welcome, Lyra," she said. "I am Director Ellis. We will help you find your place here." Ellis asked Lyra about her skills and interests. Lyra thought for a moment. On her forest world, she had learned to run swiftly through trees and to read the stars. She spoke softly. "I can track. I can learn to repair things," Ellis nodded and showed Lyra a hollow map of the station. We need a guide for new arrivals, and we need help in the hydroponics bay. Which would you prefer? Lyra looked at the green plants and glass, and then at the people wandering the corridors. She chose, I will help grow food. Ellis smiled. Excellent. Follow me. They walked to the hydroponics bay, a large domed room filled with rows of glowing plants and bubbling water channels. Lyra reached out to touch a leaf of a slender vine. The plant felt warm under her fingertips. A technician handed her a small tool to prune dead leaves and showed her how to adjust the water flow. Lyra nodded and worked carefully. She learned quickly, moving gracefully among the racks. As midday approached, Lyra paused at a window that looked into the station's main docking bay. She saw Rio's ship leaving the pad. A pang of longing struck her. She remembered Rio's gentle smile and the promise he had made. She missed him, but was grateful for his help. She turned back to the plants and continued pruning, focusing on the work before her. Over the next days, Lyra found routine in the hydroponics bay. She greeted new arrivals, handed out water cups, and helped tend to seedlings of alien fruits. She smiled more often now, and station residents began to notice. One day, a small group of children gathered at the bay's entrance, curious about the alien werewolf girl. Lyra greeted them shyly. They asked questions about her fur and her homeworld. She answered them simply and found joy in their wonder. Meanwhile, Rio drifted through the nearby asteroid belt, searching for salvage contracts. He kept one eye on his cum unit, hoping for any news of Lyra. He missed her bravery and gentle spirit. At night, he stared at the stars and thought of Allo Station, wishing he could visit, but he had debts to pay and work to do before he could rest. Back on Allo Station, a whisper spread through the corridors. Poacher ships had been sighted near the rim. Ellis called a meeting in the central hall, where station leaders gathered around a hollow projection of local space lanes. Lyra sat near Mara and listened as Ellis said, We believe the hunters who took Lyra may hunt again. We must prepare. Lyra's heart pounded. She thought of Rio's ship drifting alone in the belt. She clenched her fists, fur rippling on. Her arms, Mara touched Lyra's shoulder. We will protect you, Mara whispered. Director Ellis continued, We will send a warning to all ships and deploy our defense drones. But we also need volunteers to help monitor the scans. Hands rose around the room. Lyra felt Tornchy wanted to help, but she was still weak from her chains. She looked at Mara, who nodded encouragement. Lyra took a deep breath and raised her hand. I will help, she said. The room fell silent, then Ellis smiled. Thank you, Lyra. Your tracking skills will be invaluable. Ellis assigned Lyra to the station's sensor deck, a small room filled with glowing panels and monitors. Lyra stepped inside and felt the weight of responsibility. She studied the readouts and learned to spot small blips that indicated passing ships. She worked side by side with a veteran technician named Yalan, who guided her with patience and respect. Under Jalan's tutelage, Lyra learned to adjust the station's long-range sensors and to flag any unregistered vessel. She felt a thrill each time she spotted something new. On the third day, Lyra saw a streak on the outer scan, a small ship moving fast and off the normal lanes. Her heart raced as she tapped Jalen's console. There, see that. Jalen leaned over her shoulder and nodded. It's a poacher. Skiff, Yalan said. It's heading this way. Lyra felt fear and determination. She called into the comm system, Director Ellis. We have an incoming target. Minutes later, drone bays opened with soft hums and warm light. Small defense drones lifted off the station's hull and moved toward the poacher skiff. Lyra pressed her fox-like ears against the comm speaker, heart pounding. The skiff slowed and sent a hail. Director Ellis replied firmly, This station is under protection. You may not dock. The poacher skiff retreated into the dark. Lyra exhaled slowly. The adrenaline left her shaking, but she felt pride in having helped protect Allo Station and perhaps Rio's ship as well. She stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the dark expanse. The station lights glittered like stars against the void. Lyra whispered to herself, We are safe. A moment later, Mara joined her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You did well, Mara said. Lyra turned, a small smile on her lips. We all did, she replied. That night, Lyra returned to her quarters and sat by the viewport. She thought of Rio drifting among asteroids and of the promise they shared. She touched the clean cloth around her wrist and whispered, "Thank you, Rio." The stars beyond seemed to shine brighter in answer. Lyra knew the road ahead would still hold dangers, but she also knew she was no longer chained. She was standing strong with friends and purpose, ready for whatever came next. Lyra woke to the soft hum of Allostation's life systems. The morning light filtered through the viewport in her room, casting pale beams across the floor. She rose from her bed and stretched, feeling strength in her limbs. The clean cloth around her wrist was no longer bound to fresh wounds, but served as a reminder of how far she had come. After a simple breakfast in the communal dining hall, Lyra joined Mara and Yalan for a briefing in the station's command center. The room was bright with holodisplays of star charts and cargo manifests. Director Ellis stood at the head of the table, flanked by senior officers. Lyra took a place beside Yalan, her heart steady. We have a transport convoy arriving in 6 hours, Ellis began. It carries medical supplies we need for the next cycle. We also have an open berth for a technician to accompany the convoy and ensure safe passage. Anyone interested? Lyra glanced at Yalan, gave her an encouraging nod. She raised her hand. I would like to go, she said. Her voice was calm but firm. Ellis studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well, Lyra. You will join technician. Marlowe. Report to the loading bay at cycle time 8. Lyra bowed her head slightly. The transport would leave in a few hours. She would help deliver aid to a remote research outpost. With the briefing over, Lyra accompanied Yalan back to the sensor deck. The room thrummed with activity as technicians monitored incoming data. Lyra felt at home here now. Yalan guided her to a console that displayed nearby traffic lanes. We have a clear path to the convoy's route, he said, but storms in the ion belt can cause interference. You'll help keep our comm channels open. Lyra nodded. She activated the comlink and ran a systems check. The steady beep of the console reassured her. She thought of Rio and hoped his salvage runs were going well. She made a mental note to ask Ellis if she could send a personal message to him once the convoy departed. The hours passed quickly. Lyra helped Yalan reroute a freighter's flight path to avoid a loose asteroid cluster and synchronize communications. With a mining vessel, each task filled her with confidence. At cycle time 7, she left the sensor deck for the hydroponics bay one last time before her departure. The plants greeted her with familiar green leaves and soft mist. She knelt by a row of berry vines and trimmed away faded blossoms, her movements precise. Mara found her there. Lyra, the convoy is ready, she said, offering a small satchel. Lyra accepted it. Inside were spare comm transponders and ration packs for the journey. She hugged Mara briefly. Thank you for everything, she whispered. Mara smiled. Go safely, she said. In the loading bay, Lyra met technician Marlowe, a tall human with close-shorn hair and gentle eyes. His uniform was neat and his hands worked quickly as he loaded crates into the transport pod. Lyra joined him, arranging boxes of medical kits and nutrient gels. Marlowe glanced at Lyra's fur-covered arms. I've heard about your work, he said. You're our station's hero. Lyra felt a flush of pride but shook her head. I just do what I can, she replied. When the pod was secure, Marlowe led Lyra into the transport shuttle. The cabin was small but comfortable, with 2 padded seats facing a viewport. Lyra strapped in and watched as the shuttle departed the station. Allostation shrank behind them until it was a distant ring of lights. Inside the shuttle, Marlowe initiated the jump drive. The stars smeared into lines and Lyra closed her eyes against the rush. When they emerged from hyperspace, they were near the research outpost known as Pella 9. The outpost floated beside a blue-green planet ringed by ice. Marlowe guided the shuttle down to the landing platform. Lyra felt the gentle thrum of the engines. As they touched down at the airlock, they were met by a small group of researchers and medics. One of them, a woman with rosy skin and bright eyes, greeted them. "Thank you for coming," she said. "We've had storms that disrupted our supply lines. We're out of critical supplies." Lyra and Marlowe unloaded the crates. Lyra offered a comforting smile to a childlike alien who had a bandaged leg. The child's eyes lit up when Lyra handed over a packet of healing gel. The simple act filled Lyra's heart with warmth. Over the next cycle, Lyra helped distribute supplies and assist in emergency treatments. She learned how to prepare nutrient infusions and even helped set a sling for a wounded researcher's arm. Each task reminded her of the kindness Rio had shown her. She hoped one day to repay him. As the outpost prepared to send their thanks, the lead researcher invited Lyra to see the planet below. Through a thick glass dome, Lyra looked down at swirling oceans and cloud patterns. She imagined lush forests like those of her homeworld. The sight filled her with longing and hope. When their mission was complete, Lyra and Marlowe returned to Allo Station. The journey back was quiet. Lyra sat by the viewport, fingers tracing the marks on the glass. She thought of Rio's battered shuttle drifting among asteroids. She wondered if he was safe. Back at Allo Station, Lyra parted with Marlowe at the unloading bay. He shook her hand. "You were brilliant out there," he said. "I hope to work with you again." Lyra smiled. "Thank you, Marlowe. Safe travels." That evening, Lyra met Mara and Yalin in the hydroponics bay. They brought news. A poacher's skiff had been sighted near the station's sector, but the defense drones had driven it off. Lyra felt relief. She realized how much this place and these people had come to mean to her. Later, Lyra returned to her quarters and settled by the viewport. The stars sparkled against the void. She pressed a small device Rio had given her. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Rio, it's me, Lyra. I hope you're safe. I'm at Allo Station. Please call when you can." She set the device aside and watched the stars waiting. Minutes passed. Then the crackled to life. Rio's familiar voice broke through. "Lyra, I heard your message. I'm fine. Just need to make a run through the belt. Can I come back to Allo Station?" Lyra's heart leaped. She pressed a button. "Come as soon as you can. I'll be waiting." Rio's voice hummed softly. "I'll see you soon." Lyra leaned back and let out a breath she did not know she held. The stars outside seemed brighter now. She touched the clean cloth around her wrist and whispered, "Soon, Rio." The station lights reflected in her silver eyes as she imagined the day they would meet again. She drifted to sleep with that hope in her heart, ready for whatever Part 5 would bring. Lyra woke to the soft thrum of Allo Station's engines and the gentle glow of dawn light through her viewport. Today was the day Rio would arrive. Her heart beat with excitement and nerves. She dressed in her simple uniform and wrapped a fresh cloth around her wrist, leaving the faded one Rio had first given her as a keepsake on her bedside table. She stepped into the corridor and found Mara waiting with a tray of fruit and protein paste. "Good morning," Mara said with a warm smile. "Today Rio comes home." Lyra nodded, her silver eyes shining. She took a deep breath and accepted the tray. She ate slowly, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Mara placed a gentle hand on Lyra's shoulder. "He will be safe," she said. Lyra gave a small smile. "I know." Lyra made her way to the docking bay, her steps light.
Oh.
She walked past hydroponics, where seedlings sprouted in neat rows, and past the sensor deck, where Yalin waved at her. She reached the bay's main viewing platform early and pressed her hands against the glass, watching for the familiar silhouette of Rio's ship. The station lights reflected off her fur, soft and pale in the morning glow. Behind her, station workers bustled about, securing cargo pods and checking systems. Lyra's eyes never left the blackness beyond the bay's open doors. Time passed. Slowly, the hum of distant engines reached her ears, and she straightened, straining to see. At last, through the haze of atmosphere, Rio's ship emerged, battered but intact. It glided in under control and settled onto the landing pad. Cheers rose from the technicians near the controls. Lyra's chest tightened. She turned and ran down the ramp, her boots echoing on the metal floor. Rio climbed down from the cockpit ladder, his dusty coveralls and scruffed hair showing the toll of his recent runs. He spotted Lyra and froze for a moment, as if he could not believe his eyes. Then he dropped the small crate he carried and rushed forward. They met halfway, and Rio swept Lyra into a gentle hug. She pressed her head against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of engine oil and star wind. Rio held her tight, his rough hands stroking her fur. "I missed you," he whispered. Lyra's eyes closed. "And I missed you," she replied. They stepped apart and studied each other with soft smiles. Owl's eyes shone with relief. "You look strong," he said. Lyra pointed to her wrapped wrist. "I am free, thanks to you." Rio nodded and pulled a small box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a metal band etched with delicate star patterns. "For you," he said. Lyra's ears perked. He slid the band onto her wrist over the cloth. "It's a promise, our promise." Lyra touched it gently. "I will never forget." They walked toward Rio's ship together. Rio carried his crate, and Lyra followed, her tail swishing softly. Inside, Rio offered her a seat by the viewport. Lyra looked out at the station lights shimmering in the mist. Rio set his crate down and opened it to reveal fresh supplies. Tools, food rations, and a small Hall emitter. "I thought we could use this," Rio said, holding up the emitter. He activated it, and a tiny image of Allo Station appeared above his palm. "We can talk whenever we need." Lyra smiled, placing her hand beside his on the Hala. The warm blue glow reflected in her eyes. Rio packed his supplies into the ship's storage area. Lyra watched and spoke softly. "I want to learn more," she said. "Want to help others like me." Rio nodded, wiping grease from his hands. "I will teach you everything I know. Navigation, repairs, survival." He turned the ship's console on. "Let's plan our next journey." They reviewed star charts and route maps. Rio traced a line from Allo Station to a distant system, where rumor spoke of a hidden sanctuary for rare beings. Lyra leaned forward, fascinated. "That sounds perfect," she said. Rio tapped his finger on the chart. "It will be dangerous pirate routes, asteroid fields, but together we can do it." Lyra nodded with determination. "Once their plans were set," Rio guided Lyra to the cockpit. He showed her the controls: throttle, life support check, navigation grid. Lyra pressed her hands against the panels, absorbing every lesson. She asked questions, and Rio answered patiently. Each answer built her confidence. Rio's pride showed in his gentle smiles as they prepared for departure. A station attendant arrived with a message from Director Ellis. She handed Rio a data card. Rio opened it and read. After a moment, he looked up at Lyra. "Director Ellis sends her thanks," he said, "and offers us fuel and passage whenever we return." Lyra beamed. "Tell her thank you," she replied. Rio nodded and recorded a short hollow message in return. The station bay lights dimmed, signaling closure of the docks. Rio engaged the engines, and the ship rumbled to life. Lyra strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. Rio glanced at her and gave a thumbs up. Lyra returned it, her silver eyes bright with excitement. The ramp retracted, and the ship lifted off. Allo Station's domed lights receded behind them as they ascended into the dark. Lyra watched the station grow smaller until it was a glowing pinprick. She reached out and touched the starband on her wrist, feeling its cool metal against her. Rio switched on the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the cabin filled with soft hums. Lyra pressed her head against the console, overwhelmed by the rush of speed. Rio drifted a hand to hers. "We're together," he said. Lyra grasped his fingers. "Always," she replied. In the calm after the jump, Lyra opened the Hall emitter. Director Ellis's smiling face appeared. "Safe travels," Ellis said, "and may you find what you seek." Lyra and Rio bowed to the Hala. "Thank you," they said together. The Hala faded. They set a course for the distant sanctuary system. Lyra studied the navigation grid, her heart full of hope. Rio monitored the engines. The ship glided through silent space, two companions bound by trust, freedom, the promise of adventure. As the stars flowed by, Lyra leaned back and closed her eyes. She thought of her home forest world and wondered if she would return one. Rio watched her with affection and thought of the promise he had made. Together, they would face whatever dangers came and bring safety to those who needed it. The endless cosmos stretched before them, and Lyra smiled softly. Part 5 of Their journey had ended, but the greatest adventure lay ahead. Lyra awoke to the gentle hum of the hyperdrive winding down. Soft light from distant stars glowed at the viewport. Rio stirred in the co-pilot seat. They had reached the system of Thalos, home to the hidden sanctuary. Lyra's heart pounded. With excitement and relief, today they would find a home for rare beings like her. Rio checked the navigation console. "We're stable," he said. "The next jump point will put us just outside the outer belt." Lyra nodded. She wrapped her fingers around the cool metal band on her wrist, a promise of friendship and freedom. Together, they walked to the ship's rear ladder and climbed to the small observation deck. Lyra pressed her forehead against the glass, gazing at the pale blue gas giant that filled the view. Its rings shimmered with ice and rock. "There," Rio said quietly, pointing to a thin trail of asteroids. "We'll navigate through that gap." Lyra watched as Rio engaged the engines. The ship drifted gently, slipping between floating stones. Lyra held the railing, trusting Rio's skill. A few small rocks tapped the hull, but did no harm. Rio guided them safely through. And soon they emerged into clear space above the planet's rings. Below them, a cluster of orbital platforms and spires hovered in formation. Lights blinked along docking arms, and slender ships moved like fireflies in the dark. Lyra felt a surge of hope. This place would be her new home, and the home of many others who needed safety. Rio hailed the sanctuary's control tower. Soft voice answered. "Welcome, travelers. This is Sanctum Theta. Please proceed to docking arm 4. Rio followed the directions, and Lyra watched as they approached a long, curved platform. Magnetic clamps gripped the ship, and the ramp lowered. They stepped onto the platform together. The air smelled of ozone and cultivated flowers. Lyra inhaled deeply. The scent was clean and gentle. A row of tall pillars led to a grand archway carved with symbols of protection and unity. At the entrance stood a figure in flowing robes, skin the color of moonlight and eyes bright in the dim glow. "Greetings," the figure said in a melodic voice. "I am Curator Solus. You must be Lyra and Rio." Lyra bowed her head. "Yes," she said softly. Rio nodded. "Thank you for your welcome." Solus smiled. "Come, I will show you the heart of the sanctuary." They followed Solus through corridors lined with hanging gardens and softly singing fountains. Lyra saw aliens of all shapes, feathered wanderers, many-limbed explorers, gentle giants moving peacefully among the walkways. Each being seemed at ease in the sanctuary's calm embrace. Solus led them to a central plaza, around a crystalline tree that glowed from within. Its branches reached toward the domed ceiling, and pale light filtered like dawn. Solus placed a hand on the tree's trunk. "This is the lifeblood of our home," he said. "Its energy heals and protects all who gather beneath its boughs." Lyra stepped forward and laid a hand on the smooth crystal. Warmth flowed into her. She closed her eyes and felt strength in her wounded wrist. Rio watched her with admiration. Solus nodded in approval. "Lyra, you are free here. Find your place among us." Solus then showed Lyra to her new living quarters. Cozy suite with a soft bed, a desk, and a small window overlooking a garden. Terra's walls were painted with scenes of forests and rivers. Lyra touched the mural of tall trees. Tears came to her eyes, memories of her home world. Rio placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You belong here," he said. Lyra smiled. She unpacked her few belongings and set the star band on a shelf. Rio helped her hang a simple hollow frame showing Aloe Station and their first jump routes. They laughed softly at the memory. River-scented candles glowed on a side table. Lyra lit one and watched the flickering flame. That afternoon, Solus brought Rio to the vocational wing. "We value your skill as a salvage pilot," Solus said. Would you join our fleet as a scout and guardian? Rio paused, thinking of Lyra's safe future. Then he nodded. I would be honored. Solus smiled broadly. Welcome, Rio. Your shuttle will become a sanctuary vessel. Rio's face lit with pride. Lyra appeared at the door, having heard her name. Rio turned to her. What do you think? He asked. Lyra's eyes shone with happiness. I think this is perfect, she said. They embraced in the quiet hall. Over the next cycle, Lyra learned the sanctuary's ways. She tended to injured travelers in the healing gardens and helped nurture saplings. Of the crystal tree, she guided lost visitors through the winding paths and showed them kindness. Each day her confidence grew. She no longer felt the weight of her past chains. One evening, Rio invited Lyra to fly with him. They climbed into the newly refitted sanctuary shuttle painted in soft whites and blues. Lyra sat beside Rio at the controls. He coached her as they soared through the rings, mapping safe passages and avoiding debris. Lyra marveled at the view of the glowing gas giant and the distant stars. She guided the ship with calm concentration. Rio beamed at her progress. After the flight, they returned to the plaza beneath the crystal tree. Travelers gathered for the evening ceremony. Solis raised his arms, and soft music rose from invisible instruments. Candles floated around the crowd. Sleuth spoke. Tonight we celebrate new beginnings. Lyra, Rio, join us. Solus placed a small crystal pendant around Lyra's neck, and another around Rio's. May this bind your spirits to our sanctuary, he said. Applause and gentle cheers filled the air. Lyra's fur pricked with joy. Rio squeezed her hand. They watched the crystal tree's branches glow brighter in celebration. Travelers danced in slow circles beneath the light. Lyra and Rio swayed with them, sharing smiles and laughter. For the first time in Lyra's life, she felt truly free and truly home. Later, under the domed sky, Lyra leaned against Rio. She looked at the stars beyond the glass. Rio wrapped an arm around her. We did it, he whispered. Lyra nodded. Together, she replied. The hidden sanctuary of Thalos became their new beginning. No longer chained by fear or hurt, Lyra stood tall among friends. Rio remained by her side as pilot and protector. Their future was bright and open as the galaxy itself. The last chapter of their journey had begun a journey of healing, hope, and discovery. Beneath the crystal tree, they knew that whatever stars they followed next, they would always walk free and together.